Hello everybody, welcome to tonight's stream. Sorry it's a little bit late. I was working a couple extra hours tonight trying to get some work stuff done. So I'm live now. I'm going to be taking some feedback for Kane and Sanjana. And then afterwards, hopefully, I will be opening up Unreal Engine and doing some fun stuff with that. I haven't really done that in a while, but I had an idea for a shot, and I had Madison send me the files over because she's animating it, and I'm going to maybe put that in Unreal and play around with some stuff like that afterwards if we have time. So, let's see. Hey, Pratham, Krish Q with Bali, so frustrated if I mess with the leg stretch and key that it seems to only work if I commit to the knee never locking, being straight, or if it gets off model. Look, everything else is looking nice, just the knee popping. I don't know to start over. I've used both 4 and 5. 5 I typically I use 4.26 for work, but 5 is fun with all the new features it has. I will probably be using 4.26 because I'm using a scene from the Unreal Engine Marketplace, the Soul City. And so just because it's optimized for 4.26, it just runs a lot better. So I'll probably be using 4 today. And then as with knee pops, Krish, especially with Bali, my feedback would be try not to use leg stretch at all. Like that should be your 100% goal, because my class 1 mentor, whenever I took it, said if you do a walk cycle properly, you won't have to stretch the legs to keep knee pops out. Now, realistically, most of the time we will, but I tried to do that the very, very, very last step. Like I'm 99% there and I'm just cleaning up like 2 or 3 knee pops. And so really the way you fix out your knee pops, there's several ways. You can do it with the TY of the ball. You can do it with the rotate Z. And then you can do it with the foot roll. And you can do it with the TY or TX of the foot translation. And so really it's just pushing and pulling here and there of like, oh, the knee's stretching here. Well, if I pull the hips down, it's going to break the contact down passing up poses. It's going to make the up pose lower than the passing. Well, you're like, well, I can't do that. So then you're like, well, what if I just take a little bit from the rotate Z of the ball, and then that fixes the knee pop there. And then you get to another section and you're like, well, I can't rotate the ball because that's going to mess up the rotation of the hips as the ball steps. You're like, well, I can just bring him up just a little bit in TY, or I can bring him over in TX just a little bit, or maybe I can rotate the foot roll up just a little bit. And I'm going to go through and do that, just push and pull and make sure everything is nice. And then once I get as many knee pops gone as I can, then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to slightly stretch the knee whenever I need to with a motion trail. So I'm going to select the ball on the knee, I'm going to motion trail it, and I'm just going to make sure my spacing is nice and smooth. So hopefully that helps, Krish. If you want me to take a look at something or go over it with you, I can. But with that said, let me just open up the links and I'm going to go over it real quick. Also, I was going to, let's see. I was going to open up a file and do a polishing demo, but something wasn't going right. I needed a reference, so I'm hoping I can get that as well. Okay, so first we're going to look at Kane's shot. And then for Sanjana's, I'm actually going to open it up and do some polishing stuff. So let me switch over to screen share, transition. All right, can y'all let me know if y'all hear this okay? I just want to make sure my sound is working.
What is that?
It's finest in the shop. Oh, we have some shepherd's pie peppered with actual shepherd on top. And I just begun Is the politician so oily? It's served with a doily. Have one.
Put it on a bun.
Okay, so overall notes from Kane. Let me just read them. Okay, 2 body mechanic shots. I'm going to give you notes on those. I think the first question I wanted to go over is whether the zombie and morgue shot are worth going back into and trying to polish up, or if you should just move on to new shots. 9 times out of 10, my opinion is going to be do a new shot. Because unless the idea is just absolutely the best idea ever, it's always going to be easier doing a new shot, and you're going to do better work because you've improved, right? And so very rarely is it ever worth the heartache of going into an old shot and being like, oh my goodness, what did I do here, right? I've tried to go into old shots before, and I end up just wanting to delete everything and reblock from scratch because my workflow changes so rapidly every single shot because I get better, more efficient. I go back and I'm like, what did I do here? Why did I do that? And it's just an exercise in frustration, and I lose motivation. I've actually been dealing with that with a shot because the idea is a really good idea. I've been told by many people that it's the best idea on my reel. But because I got a job and all this other stuff, I started blocking it 1.5 years ago. And I've been trying to get back into it, spline it, polish it, and it's just so wildly different than I'm used to animating because I've changed in 1.5 years that it's absolutely demotivating trying to spline and polish a shot that was blocked out horribly, terribly. So, as a general rule, I would say try not to go back to old shots, just plow on and do new ones. With that said, let me just watch these over again. I watched that one. Let me watch over this one, and let me just double check.
On and on, strangers waiting up and down the boulevard.
So as for the morgue shot, I would say definitely move on and do a new shot and try to remove this one as quickly as you can. Not that it's necessarily a bad idea, it's just there's a lot of mechanics issues and stuff, and I can tell from your class 5 shot, your class 6 shot, you've improved a lot. And so I'd much rather see you move on and do a new shot than have to go through and rework some of the body mechanics issues in this shot. I just think, the amount of time it would take to polish this, you could block out a brand new shot and it would probably be a lot better. I would also like to see a little more like what you have in your class 6 shot as well, of like heavy performance. Like this is more of a dance and he's kind of singing, but there's really not a lot of specific acting choices to go with what he's saying. He's just singing and he's just moving around doing things. So it would be great if you could do another like dialogue shot with a really, really strong performance, maybe something sad, something subtle, something that's very character driven, I guess is what I would say. So for me, my advice would be try to replace this shot off of your reel. I think this one is nice. I like the zombies. I like the singing. I like the idea. I do think relatively it's a little bit on the nose because it's a person singing about eating people and stuff like that, and it's about zombies, so it's very, very on the nose. I like to have my shots much more, I guess, off kilter. That's not the right word, but like something that my mentor said was like the best shots, the characters are doing nothing, have nothing to do with what they're talking about. Like he was saying that there was the legendary Pixar animator and he was watching his demo reel that got him into Pixar. And the best shot on his reel was a shot of 2 chefs. And they're just cooking, they're interacting together, but they're talking about how they want to have a baby, right? And he said it was so good because 90% of the time, us as people, we don't do what we're talking about. We're fidgeting or something. We're moving a chair. If it's an uncomfortable conversation, we're twiddling our fingers. We're distracting ourselves from the awkwardness. All those kind of nuanced traits of humans makes a really, really, really nice acting shot of, like, you know, what I was talking about with the chefs is, like, you know, you can sell the character of what they're talking about through what they're doing, even though it's not exactly one to one of what they're doing. Or so, for example, you know, she's cutting carrots and he's like, I want to have a baby, and she pauses while she's cutting the carrots and she's like, really? And, like, you know, whatever you decide her attitude is towards what he just said can be shown through what they're doing, even though it's not one to one. And for me, that's what really, really sells an acting performance, is being able to find ways to show emotion and dialogue through something they're doing that has nothing to do with what they're talking about. And for me, that rings so, so nicely. So with that said, that's what I would try to keep an eye out for the future. But I do really like the idea of this shot, and I think it's fun. And I don't think there's really a ton of body mechanics issues in here. So if you wanted to go in and say, spend a week, spend maybe 2 weeks, just start polishing it, take all the stuff you learned from class 6 to put it back in here, fix some of the polishy stuff, I think you'd be so nicely served doing that, because it's a great shot and it will help you get a job somewhere. And it'll give you time to do an even better shot while also still being able to apply to jobs with this shot. So my advice would be, scrap this shot, put a week, maybe 2 weeks on this one, do as much as you can, and then go on to a new shot. And need to... Oh, really? How many of these people do I have to ban? Oh, where's my mod tools? I wish I had a mod in chat that could ban these people. Give me 1 second, guys. Still trying to figure out how to use the stream manager. Oh, thank you, whoever that is. Thanks, Madison. All right, so let's go back to the critique. If I'm just going over broad notes for this shot of just things you can look at while you're polishing. Also, if you can ban Plana and delete her message, it's always time. Also talking about buying followers. So.
What is that? What is that?
It's finest in the shop. Oh, we have some shepherd's pie peppered with actual shepherd on top. And I just begun. Is the politician so oily? It's served with a doily. Have one.
Put it on a bun.
Have one.
On a bun.
I think your B shapes are just delayed by 1 frame. I would like to get this shape on 509. And the one at 508, I'd try to get, this one I'd try to get at 507. So just getting those 1 frame earlier.
Bun. What is that?
It's fop.
That's that.
It's fop. Fop. Finest in the shop. Oh, we have some shepherd's pie peppered with actual shepherd on top. And I just begun. Is the politician so oily? It's served with a doily. Have one.
Put it on a bun. What is that?
It's fop. It's fop.
Watch out for the chest here. I'm noticing it's hitting a bit of a wall. Just for the speed that she's coming in, right there, the chest is like hitting and the neck is like overlapping and coming back. It feels a little bit tight for a zombie who's supposed to be like moving around and like loose, I guess you'd say. So I would just try to loosen up the chest through this area.
Fun is in the shop. Fun is in the shop.
For this here, the wink, I would try to get the cheek a little more. I'd try to get the cheek a little more activated in this squint, and try to just raise that cheek control and maybe even raise the mouth corner. Because if she's winking, you know, the entire right side of the face is activated, so you're going to be pulling the corner up, you're going to be pulling the cheek, you're going to be squinting the outer. So I would try to, if you can, lower this a bit. Get this a little bit lower. I would try to raise the cheek, pull the mouth corner up a bit, and just really get the whole face coming up like that.
Fun is in the shop.
And it can be subtle, but even with the most subtle wink, like, you're still getting a little bit of corner movement in there.
Oh, we have some shepherds with actual shepherd on top.
Also, watch out for her movement here. I would just try to break up the torso a little bit, because through this section, it feels like she's just pivoting from her hips and there's no squashing or lead and follow in the torso at all. Quick answer to Pratham's question. What's the biggest thing you'd say is a change working in a shot as part of a team in a studio versus shot and assignment? To answer briefly, it would just be, you're not the director, you're not the owner of your work at a studio. You're fulfilling someone else's vision. So if I'm doing a shot at AM, if it's my vision, I'm going to do it in my shot. And obviously I'm going to have a mentor guiding me, giving me advice, giving me help. But at the end of the day, it's my decision, my shot, my vision. You're at a studio, you're getting paid to fulfill someone else's vision. And so you have to keep that in mind. So you may have this cool idea, but if it doesn't hook up with the shot before yours, that's already been approved. If it doesn't hook up with the shot after yours, that's already been approved, then you're going to have to change your shot to make sure that fits. If you get a note, whether you agree with it or not, you're going to have to address that. Also, you've got so many talented people in other parts of the pipeline. It makes your job so much easier in the idea aspect. Because you're not just given a blank audio and they're like, do this idea. You know, you already have storyboards, you have characters that already have personalities to them. You may even also have video reference, depending on what production. You may even have layout and cameras already animated. And so all those amazing, talented artists that do the work before you make your job a lot easier so that you can focus on what you do best, which is animation. So hopefully that helps. That's the short and quick and dirty answer to that question. So try to just probably drag the torso a little bit here. Come down. And I would try to raise. So like she's like on top, right? So I would try to like stretch the torso a little bit. So she's like on top. And just like bounce that chest a little bit. So it would come down here. And then maybe come back up. And also watch, because it hits a wall right there. If I track the spacing. Right there, it hits a wall till the end of the shot. So just try to ease that up a little bit.
And I just begun. Is the politician so oily? It's served with a doily. Have one.
So those would just be general notes. Like I'd try to just go through with a couple of the things that I said and just make a pass, especially on the lip sync. I can tell that you've improved a lot from this shot to your class 6 shot. So I would go through, try to make a lip sync pass, go through, clean up the spacing, make sure it's not hitting any walls. Try to clean up the fingers a little bit. I feel like they're all kind of moving as a unit to an extent. Clean up the couple notes I showed here. And then I would just put a stamp on it and move on to something else. And then as for the body mechanic shots, these are something I wanted to get into a little bit more. Let me check here. Oh. I'll download those in a second. But let's go ahead and move on to the body mechanic shots. What's up, Brandon? This shot is working pretty well for me. The only thing that was a big issue that a couple things I saw that were a big issue. Everything else is working really well. The only thing I'm noticing that's like a major like issue is right now she has all this momentum swinging up, and so her cog is hitting this trajectory. Let me hit green. There we go. She has this trajectory, and because it's towards camera, so it feels like essentially what I'm trying to get at is if I'm looking at her from the side, right? So she's facing this direction. It feels like she's swinging in a straight line, and then out of nowhere she just curves towards the robot. And it's right here, right? Like if she's swinging, it's almost like a no, Garrison, he's just making a joke. He's not actually my dad. I'm not actually his dad, I should say. We were both in class 5 together, and I think not class 6 together, but we were in a Kyoso class. But this would follow the same principles as a pendulum, right? So as soon as the spacing slows down this way, it's going to come back this way. So if you look at the spacing of the hips, just like a pendulum, it should be slowing down here and starting to drop, but it continues to go up and forward when there's nothing pushing it farther up. Thank you, Brandon, for the 5 gifted. That is amazing. You're the first person to get, well, I was the first person to gift a sub, but you are the second person, and you're the first person to give 5 subs. So happy September, everybody, and thank you, Brandon, and congrats to everyone that got the gifted subs. Basically what that means, Pratham, is subs are the way that you guys can support the stream. And so you can gift subs to people, and you're basically paying for them to have a subscription to our channel, which some channels have benefits for subscribers. You can also not have to watch ads. So like whenever there's an ad at the first of our video that's mandatory from Twitch, if you're a subscriber, you don't have to watch that. So there's lots of nice little perks and benefits, and there may be subscriber benefits in the future that we're talking about maybe doing. So, you know, who knows? Maybe it'll pay off. But what I would try to do here is have the hips come up and hit before the leg plants and pulls the hips up. right? Because right now it feels like it comes up and it just kind of glides and drifts upwards until that leg swings over, and then the leg starts to pull it up, right? So right here is when the leg hits, and this leg is pulling the hips up. So from this point onward, your hips are good, but before at that, for the past like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, for the 8 frames before that, it feels a little bit floaty because the hips are kind of moving, but there's nothing driving the hips. So one thing you could do is you could just have the foot land on this frame, in which case it would not feel that bad at all. So at 106 you could have the foot hit, or you can have a little more momentum going into the swing, so you'd be coming up a little bit more here, and your hips would start to drop, right? And they would come down until you hit with your leg, and then they would start to come up. Right, so you would have... Right, so your hips are starting to fall until you catch yourself with the leg, and then it starts to pull you up. So I might do a little bit of both. Hey, Cadriano. I'll leave that up to you, but definitely make the leg hit 1 to 2 frames earlier, and also make the hips start to come down, and then the leg pushes the hips back upwards, because that'll just make it feel like it's being affected. The run cycle feels good. Everything on there feels nice. It would be nice to see a little bit of drag on the hands as you come through. Maybe something like this. Something like that. Just try to add a little bit of drag on the hands. Hype train. Did we get another sub? Oh, thank you for the 100 bits, Rid. Really appreciate that. Another thing I would try to do... I would possibly try to break up the legs a little bit more. So I like where the legs are at here, keeping them nice and offset. Let me go back to green on here. I like where the legs are at here. Once you go to pull them in a little bit more, I might try to get this leg out a little bit more, maybe this one in a little bit less. So the back leg is out a bit more. And then you can keep the leg closest to camera here, the one further away, a little bit out. And then you can get them together on this frame. So that way you have almost like this kind of effect of like one's behind, it goes over, and then they come together. Yeah. And then the other thing I would watch out for is your wrist is pretty broken right here. I would possibly try to... Here, go ahead and have your hand or wrist rotated more like this on this frame. That way it's already rotated more this way instead of this way. And that way, by the time you swing here, you can still keep it relatively straight on. And just try to rotate it a bit more up as you come around, just to keep it from being broken. Everything else there feels pretty good. Also for the top leg, I would just try to offset it to where the right leg starts to come down and the left leg starts to drag and come back down. Thank you so much, Rid. So as this one starts to come down, and it keeps going up. There it is. There we go. Ghost that. Turn the ghosting to like 5 frames. Let me turn it to 2 sketches. There we go. No, let's turn it off. So this is when it starts to come down. So for this leg here, when this one starts to come down, I would continue to keep this leg up. And maybe drag a little bit. And then I can start to bring it in how you have it. So let me watch this together. Yeah, so basically I'm just dragging the screen right leg a little bit more. That way you don't get both legs feeling like they're moving at the same time. You have one and then it goes like that. Yes, I will. Ask away, Cadriano, and I'll find time in between giving feedback to answer your question. So those are my main notes for this shot. Overall, I think it's in a pretty solid spot. So I would do those notes and then do general polishing that you can and then move on to probably this shot. First things, just pacing wise, I would try to hold this much longer. Right now she's like doot 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 doot, and it's like it's so busy. You need to give time to breathe in the shot. So just for comedic timing and pacing, I'd like to be like doot 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 doot. Hold that pose, then go back to it, right? Just give it a little time. I know because of assignment deadlines, I'm sure you were in class 3 and you had a 200 frame deadline. You couldn't have time to give that to breathe, but now that you're out of class, you can do whatever you want. Give time for this to breathe. So you're getting it ready, you go bang, hold it, and then go to messing with it. Putting it on. So I'm just trying to think about pacing right now just to try to retime things a little bit. Getting it on, thumbs up, boom. Yeah, that feels good. So yeah, just hold more time here. Thumbs up, push it, get ready. I think everything else feels good. It's just the thumbs up is way too quick. And then as for the arc of the hips go, it's moving very much almost in a line of like here and then here. Like that's kind of the arc of the hips. So they go almost in a perfect like diangular line and then they kind of curve back in the same direction. I would try to just smooth that out to where if she's here, 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 try to have it start to come back on this frame, this frame, this frame, this frame, this frame. And then you can ease back into this. Because basically, you know, if you're moving in a straight diagonal line, it's showing force in that direction. It feels a little weird, like she goes out of balance and then goes straight back into balance with her posing. Of like right now, obviously she has a heavy rocket on her back, but it feels like she's just like, it feels like she's going this way and then back that same way, and it feels a little weird. I would much rather you arc it over or arc it under. You can do one or the other. But essentially, if you're going this way with the hips, you're going to either need to arc back this way or arc over and around. But it just feels like you're going up this way and then back the same way. And so it just feels a little weird with the arc. And then as the posing is concerned, I like that you're stretching the legs. It would be nice if you could at least stretch the hips for one frame. So if you have this here, let's go ahead and... So basically right now, the chest is getting pulled straight up. It would be nice if you could drag the hips just a little bit. So you would have the hips more down here. So you've got this kind of a pose. Here you have this kind of a pose, so the torso is stretched. Even here, I'd probably try to stretch it a little bit more. And then on the third frame, you can go to what you have here. So if I turn off ghosting, turn on tracing paper. Yeah, I would just try to stretch the torso a little bit like I drew here. With the leg, I'd try to possibly go ahead and stretch this leg out here on this frame. So here you could have the foot starting to come down already, and then you could have it straight here. That way you're just offsetting the feet a little bit more, because right now you're offsetting them, but they both hit the same frame here. So if you stretch out the green left foot sooner on this frame, it'll just make it feel a little bit less unified in the movement. And then, do you have days where you don't feel like animating? And if you do, what do you do to reignite your love of it for animation, so to speak? Let's see. There are definitely times of burnout where, let's say I've had a hard day of work. You know, right now I'm working 9-hour days, 9.5-hour days. So finding the passion to animate after hours is hard sometimes, even though right now I'm trying to crunch really hard and I'm trying to animate at least an hour, 2 hours before or after work every day. So I'm animating 11-hour days. I just have to remind myself where I want to go, and I think that's what everyone has to do, is you have to be honest with yourself of where you want to be when it comes to animation. Some people, they want to be hobbyists. in which case their goals and their lifestyle and their priorities need to show that goal, right? They need to resemble that goal. Me, I want to get into feature, right? So I know if I want to get to feature, I'm going to have to do shots, I'm going to have to do animation after work because my work shots aren't feature quality. So if I just work, I'm never going to get to feature because my reel's never going to show my true skill. And so if I'm ever feeling, you know, like days where I don't feel like animating or where I don't want to animate after work, I'm like, well, do I want to get into feature? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, then I need to get down. I need to sit down. I need to animate. Some days that doesn't work. Some days, you know, I just don't feel like animating. And the days that I decide not to animate, I make sure I don't animate at all. Because if you half-ass it, if you are like, I don't feel like animating, I really don't want to animate, but then I sit down and kind of animate, it's still going to drain me just as much as if I was animating, but I'm not going to be productive at all. So there are days where I do take a day off. I don't animate after work. I don't animate before work. But I make sure that I don't even look at a computer or touch a computer. That way the next day, I'm that much more motivated to animate. And then as for work goes, you know, that's just kind of work. That's my job. I'm getting paid to do it. So you find it's very different, at least for me, it's very different animating for work than animating personally. There's really not a motivation, not motivation. It's just, that's my job. I show up to work. It's not the exciting, you know, oh my gosh, it's animating, like animating on personal shots or anything like that. You know, at the end of the day, it's kind of a job. Not that I don't enjoy it. I do enjoy animating for work. It's just, it's a very different thing where I don't feel like you can get burnt out as easily because you show up at 9 a.m., you animate, you get done at 5 p.m. It's kind of a set regimen, and once you fall into that, at least for me, it's pretty easy to keep that. And then for Cadriano, let's say I wanted to do a kung fu shot for my demo reel. How do I approach it with a reference from old kung fu movies or storyboard out the scene, or a combo of both? Thought I'd ask in advance. Okay, so Cadriano, I'll get to your question afterwards because I was actually planning on doing a demo that goes exactly to what you're asking. So please remind me after the feedback, and I will show you my method for doing kung fu, body mechanic, parkour, any of those kind of shots of how I approach that. So let me get back to the feedback. Here, I'm going to try and keep the arm up in the air. The art here isn't really working on the screen left arm, so I would try to... where is everything on this new Sync Sketch UI? Oh my goodness. The arm is here, then it's there, then it's there. I would try to get the arm in here. Boom, boom, boom. But that's also popping a lot. Let me go ahead and turn off ghosting for a second. Come to my spacing. I'm going to try to get the spacing somewhere around here. And so here I'm going to try to here. So this is what I'm going to try to do with the arms. The spacing is a bit weird, I think, right now. So trying to keep the screen right arm up higher, the screen left coming down, and just keeping the spacing fast coming down, I think you'll be fine doing something like this that I drew. And then here, watch out. This is issue with the hips. Just hitting a wall here. Right there. And you hit a wall and you kind of stay there. Right there. If I ghost it, you can see. Boom, hitting a wall there. So what I would try to do is just have her hips overshoot and settle, right? She's coming in with so much speed, but her screen left leg is slowing her down. Her hips are going to go like boom, right? And you're just going to settle after. So instead of just going stop, go overshoot and settle with the hips. And then I like the cartoony thing you're doing with the glasses. I would try to fix it a little bit because it almost feels like they're tied to an invisible string and the string loosens and they come out, and then as she turns it sucks back up into the head. I think it could be nice if you kept the glasses on the head as it drags and you really used it to punch the scaredness, right? So she's scared when the eyes flare, so it's like, whoa, it's like, whoa. So like they would stay on and then they go boing, right? So instead of coming off before she flares her eyes and face, of going like whoosh, it's gonna be boing, right? So they would start to come off here, and then they would be where you have them here, and then they would stay here, but then as you start to turn and she's not as scared anymore, she's trying to run, I would put them back on her face and they would just stay on her face here. That's what I would try to do. So rather than dragging so far before and so far after the move, I would try to keep them on the face longer and put them back on sooner and just accent the scared portion. And then that looks great. Boom. Also, she's getting hit with so much force, right? Her arm goes from here and here to here over one frame. Continue that spacing onward and have the arms and hands straight out, right? Because it feels kind of weird that over one frame, the arms and the torso and the head get snapped over an unbelievably far amount of space, and then immediately slow down to where it's this slow drift as you go off frame. It needs to be one frame, smash, 2 frames out, and it stays out the rest of the way. Same here. I would go ahead and just like throw those feet out and just keep them straight out for the rest of the shot. And then as the glasses go, I think the glasses accelerate a little too much. Over one frame, it kind of pops down here. I think the trajectory, the way it's going, I would probably try to have the glasses a little bit more here, have them a bit more here, hit the ground on this frame, go here, 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 here. Not pretty close to what you have, just a couple frames longer. I think they're just a little too quick. So. Also, try to keep this head more still here. Right now, it feels a little bit weird because she goes like here and her head's drifting around, and then she goes like, ah, right? I would try to go like rotate, whoa, right? To keep the head still whenever she looks, because the fact that it's drifting around kind of signals to the audience that she doesn't see it. And then it feels weird that she reacts because it doesn't feel like she's seen it yet. So try to have her head, looks, maybe have a little movement, but at least 4 to 6 frames before this motion, keep her head still so that she has time to see it, react, whoa, and jump back, right? So just give it a little time to react and think. So I think that would be my main notes. Hopefully all of that helps. Really nice work this week in term. And I can't wait to see what you do next week with these body mechanics shots and the zombie one. So cool. And then next we have Sanjana's shot, but I'm actually going to open that up in Maya and do a demo / polishing feedback on the shot. So give me 1 second, guys. I need to download something. Let me switch over to this. Yeah, no problem, Kane. Download. Okay. Polish. Opening that up. Also, just an update for you guys on the model. We do have final clothing and character design. And so currently right now we have surfacing going on and rigging. So I expect rigging to take 3 to 4 weeks. Surfacing, rig testing. We could possibly have a rig within the next couple months, maybe before the end of the year, which would be really, really cool. And just a sneak peek, maybe. I might have a picture of the final clothing that I can kind of sneak peek share. If y'all haven't seen it on the Instagram already. While the file's opening, this is, zoom this out to 100%. This is our final clothing and character design. So he looks super cool. He's got rad clothes. I've got a extremely talented surfacing artist setting these up with render Arnold shaders and Lambert shaders for the viewport. And he's going to have really cool jean textures, shirt textures, and skin. So just a quick update while I was waiting for this to open up. Let me go ahead and just path the textures. Hopefully in a couple weeks here I may be able to do some tests on stream with the in progress rig. Let me just click here. I always make sure that whenever I do, nope, please don't download. Every time I animate with I turn on her textures because it very much changes how you pose the face. That's something that's very, very important. Do not pose Aya without her texture on, because you'll put the texture on and you'll find out all of your posing is drastically different than you thought it was going to be. Rigs, character, crew, textures. Yes, it is. I have not been to a single studio yet that hasn't allowed me to use Animbot, and the current studio that I'm at is a very high security studio. None of our computers have internet, and I was still able to get allowed to get Animbot. So I just had to scan in the QR code that they give you for offline mode, and it works perfectly, and the studio was totally fine using it. At this point, it has basically every tool that studios have made themselves over the years. And because tools, scripts are very high maintenance for studios, because updates to Maya can make it just totally stop working. They have to have tech teams full time just updating scripts, updating tools. Animbot does all that for automatically because it's a whole team designated to do that for hundreds of studios. It's way cheaper, way more efficient for studios to purchase Animbot and allow their animators to use it than it is to keep updated with their own scripts. And then because it's so popular, they know the animators pretty much know how to use it, as opposed to having to bring them onto these new scripts, new tools, new names. So at this point, I would say Animbot is easily industry standard, and most animators will be benefited to using it, so much that I've had interviews where the animation director or whatever was like, do you know how to use Animbot? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, good, because that's very important to us, because we know how much it makes you faster. So if you didn't know, we would be, less inclined to hire you, because, using Animbot is so much faster. So I would very much suggest anybody here getting Animbot if you haven't. So another tip, just for shot setup that I do, I like to change the display. I like to turn the opacity to 1 and turn this to black, just because for me it's a lot easier to... Garrison, I believe Maya 2022 updated to Python 2, as opposed to all previous versions of Maya, which were Python 1. And so I know that pretty much every script had to rescript everything for Python 2. So if Tween Machine isn't working in Maya 22, it's because the author of the script did not rescript it for Python 2. So if you want, Maya has, Animbot has a Tween Machine, and that works in 2022. So if you need a tweener, I would say use Animbots, because it works extremely well. So if we're just talking about base polishing and going through and splining a shot, my very first thing, this was something that I was taught by John Collins, is start with the hips, start with the cog. Animbot, 100%. There's other tools that I use professionally that are very important to me, like, let's see what I got here. I've got the Overlapper 2.0 or 1.2. This thing is a lifesaver professionally, because as a student, yes, you need to learn to do overlap. But as a professional, overlap is very tedious, very time intensive, and not very artistic to some extent. If you're animating dinosaur tails, if you're animating hair, you will become very valuable to your employer if you can do overlap on hair in 10 minutes. As opposed to doing it by hand, and it takes you 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to get it right. The Overlapper 1.12 is amazing. I've been using it for years, and it has saved me so much time, especially on Kana, Bridge of Spirits. She has this very big bun on the back of her head. She has 2 long strands of hair here and a bunch of hair here that has to be animated. So I went in very first day I worked there, found the numbers that got the good overlap on her hair, and I ran overlapper every shot I did on Kana, and it worked like a charm. And I probably saved, over the year that I worked on Kana, probably 2.5, 3, 4 hours a week on just hair animating. Yes, I did work on Kana. I started out as a gameplay animator. I probably animated for 3 to 4 months on the in-game cycles, and then I spent the next 11 months on cinematics. So I would say a good half to a little more than half of the dialogue shots in the cinematics I probably did. I mainly did Kana herself. I did a lot with Zaju, the older guy, the mask maker. And then I did audio here and there for a lot of other ones. But yeah, I did a lot of work in there, and I can't wait for everyone to see it because it's going to be a groundbreaking game. But to get back to the demo, first thing I do, I take the body resolution, switch it to proxy, and I turn it just to see this. So it looks like you already do that, Sanjana. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to watch the hips, right? Nice. So it looks like you're using this control for the hips. That's nice. That's typically the control I like to use, just because it allows me to get a little bit of like fleshiness. Another thing I like to do, which this is a little more advanced using animation layers, but to get fleshiness within a walk, especially the first walk in here, I'm going to go in and I'm going to take the TY of the hips, which this may or may not work. If it doesn't work, I go in and do it manually, but I'll copy the TY of the cog, and then I'll go in on the chest, and I'll either do it on a layer or I'll just do it on the base. But I'll go through, it'll probably be easier to do it on the base here. And I'll just paste the TY of the hips onto the TY of the chest. And then, you know, maybe I'll scale it up really big just to make sure it's working nicely. So like obviously you can see like that's way too much, but I can feel that it works together with each other. So I'm like, okay, cool, boom, boom, boom. That feels nice. Obviously it's too much, so I'm just gonna go through, I'm gonna flip my viewport to absolute. And I'm just gonna start normalizing the curves so that it's not stair-stepping down like the hips are, because the hips are doing that for a reason. The chest should not be, because it's within the cog space. So boom, boom, boom. That feels pretty nice to me, right? I'm getting nice fleshiness in the IK spine. Is IK spine better for subtle acting instead of FK? It depends. It really depends on your workflow and how you work. For me, yes it is. But I typically have a hybrid workflow where I block in FK just because I find it's way easier, makes more sense to me. And then once I'm done splining, like once blocking and I flip to spline, I'm going to flip it to IK. But there's also a very powerful workflow that I use a lot where you stay in FK the whole time and you just animate the head for a subtle shot. And then you copy paste the curves to the neck and then the top and then the middle and then the bottom. And so it kind of depends on the situation, but for me, I probably use IK more, but I use FK a lot for copy-paste methods, so it really depends on your preference, I guess I'd say. So let's go through here. So now that I've got this working, I'm just going to go through, I can use Animbot's scale right tool, so it scales it relative to the key to its right. I use this a lot, and just scale it down. Boom, boom. There we go. Maybe a little too much, so I'm going to scale it down just a little bit more. There we go. Perfect. And then another thing that I noticed when I was watching your shot, Sanjana, is actually something I'm going to divert to super quickly, is the right arm. So it looks like it's constrained to the glass, I'm guessing. Is there a control for this? Ah, locator, okay. Okay, Sunjan, is the locator what's, dry? It looks like, I guess it's in a layer? Okay, so it looks like the glass is in a layer. The glass controls the hand, okay. Ba, 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 ba. So what I would suggest, because one of the first things that I noticed when I watched your shot is right now, so if you're holding a glass, right, I can move my body and my hand moves one to one with the body, but then when I move the hand, right, it moves separately. Right now, it feels like your hand is in world space and it's kind of sticking with the world and not moving with connected to the body. So the way I would set this up personally, let me go ahead, just to preserve your animation, I'm going to bake this to a cube super quick. The way I'm doing it really isn't as important as what I'm doing. So I'm just going to quickly bake the animation to a cube here. Match all transforms. Set a key. Copy. Bake all keys. And if you want to follow along on the video on how I did this, you'll be able to as well. But right now I have the cube following the hand perfectly. So now I'm going to delete the locate. I guess I need to set a key on the... Okay, I'm going to delete the locator, the glass. Okay. So now I'm going to bake the animation from the cube back to the wrist. Cool. So now I'm going to take the glass here. I'm just going to remove it from the layer just so I don't have funky things going on. Let's just go ahead and just constrain it to the hand for now. Just for simplicity, I'm going to constrain it to the hand. I know you probably need like an offset so you can animate the glass, but for right now I'm just going to constrain it to the hand and then remove. There, boom. Okay, cool. So this is what I was going to. What I would do, I would do this in IK because for me IK would be simpler, but I'm going to switch it to spine in space. So right now, if I move the cog, the hand stays still, which, as I said before, you can't do that because if I move my body, my hand follows with it. So I'm going to take the IK wrist and I'm going to flip this to spine in space, which, as you can see, it pops off. I have a tutorial here that I did earlier on how to do it without Animbot, but for time's sake, I'm going to do it with Animbot. I'm going to select this, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to do space, and I'm going to switch all keys to spine in space. So immediately, that flipped everything to spine in. So now, if I move the chest, the glass follows with, but I can also animate the IK wrist individually. So now it looks like I'm having a little bit of gimbal issues here, which I will need to fix. Curves, Euler filter. Yeah, so that's something I would do that's big because I find 80% of your time can be solved by workflow, right? Whenever I was a student, I would spend my time tracking the arcs on the wrist, and it was so much time and heartache, and I was like, it's not feeling good, and the arc was perfect, but it wasn't fixing with the body. And then I'd be like, oh, let's put it in chest space, and all my problems were solved. And so now you can literally get rid of probably half of these keyframes because now it's following with the chest. Now I can focus on making sure things work nicely. So I don't think I have the audio, but if I play through the sync sketch real quick. Okay, so that's when she does like the, right? If you can see my camera. She's like, right? So as she's walking in, I'm going to want to have, let's see, have this in a little bit just for clarity of posing. And as, you know, if Madison's still in the chat knows, I block very, very lightly and I spline very minimalistically, so I only have the keys that I need. So if I have a key here and she goes, right? When she goes, right here, I'm going to need a key here. I'm going to delete in the middle. And then I'm going to be like, okay, how can I make this have a nice arc? Well, let's kind of rotate in just a little bit. Let's kind of favor and go, right? And then maybe I need to delete this. There we go. And then another thing that I do a lot is, because now it's in chest space, right? She's going to go like, and she's going to overshoot and settle her hand. So she's like, right? She's going to make an arc, right? So this is where I want her to hit the pose, frame 39, and I want her to overshoot on frame 35. So I can either, one, track it with motion trail and go in here and do motion trails, and I can just make sure that I get a nice like arc. But as you can see, it's kind of messy. What I would try to do probably is you can either use Anabot, which is like tween, and I can just tween and overshoot here. Let me undo this. Remove motion trail, thank you. I'm getting a lot of jittering here, so I'm just going to go through and delete these. There we go. So she goes over. I feel like she needs to hit this overshoot a little bit later, and she needs to settle a little bit later. So I'm like, how does that feel? Oh, it feels pretty good. But I'm noticing that the overshoot on TX and TZ feels good, but TY doesn't feel super nice. So I'm going to smooth that out. So she goes like, and like the TY is smooth, but the X and Z is what overshoots. Feeling like there's some keys going missing here. So already that feels pretty good. And another alternative, which again, I'm noticing this as I'm starting to animate a little bit, it'll be your choice whether you want to have her hand following spine end, which will be here, which would be my choice. But you can also make it follow just the cog and not the chest, which would also be another possibility. Because depending on your shot, if you have a lot of like breaths, which your arm will move with, if you don't want to deal with sometimes having to counter that, you can put it on the chest. So it will still follow with the general body, but it'll stay relatively still when you like, you know, move the chest around quickly. And then you can just add in manually a little bit of like motion to go with that. And so if I'm looking at the cog, which also helps to go into the shot knowing it, that way you can make sure whatever control the wrist follows is relatively smooth, so it's not popping around a lot. But with that said, I think the glass hand is working pretty nicely now. There's obviously a little bit of popping here and there, and there's obviously a lot of keys that I would go through and just like, you know, go through and like clean this up. And I very much clean curves while watching what I'm doing. So I'm like, okay, I want this to go down and then back up. So this feels good to me. I go through here and I'm like, does the wrist need to pop up through this section, right? If I'm watching, there's nothing that's relatively nice about the wrist going up. I feel like simpler would be better through this section because she's just holding the glass. So I'm like, I can delete this, right? And I can just simplify the motion, because if she was doing a laugh and the wrist came up, I'd be like, okay, let's keep that in there. But because she's just holding it, I'm like, it doesn't really need to come up and back down. And same here. This is just one clean motion, so it doesn't really need to go up and then slow down and then go back up. So I'm just gonna delete this and go like that. I'm gonna okay. Now that feels pretty nice. Here does make sense why it would go up, right? Because she's like, boom, right? So what I might do is I might move this over because it feels like the motion upwards is a little bit harsh. There we go. I feel like that's better. And then I might just like clean this up a bit. There we go. And so if I'm just taking this section and I'm just going through it and cleaning the curves, X is, what is X? It's kind of diagonal. That's kind of weird. Okay, so I'm just talking about in this diagonal. It's hard to tell with, again, with these AM rigs. Sometimes they've got the weirdest orientations for their translations. Like, again, this is kind of, well, I guess it's relative to the body, so that's not terrible. So if I watch it relative to the body of just TZ, I can tell, like, okay, I don't really need a jitter right here. So let's go ahead and get rid of this key. There we go. I don't really need these jitters. So let's go ahead and clean these up. Delete these. Okay, so now we got a nice clean motion in the TZ. Very nice. Yes, Shun. Unless you're doing very low level animation, even the most basic rigs are going to have IK spine and FK spine. If they don't, honestly, you can make your own. Like, it's very easy. You just have to set up a simple constraint hierarchy of a control up here that's constrained all the controls underneath it with different fall offs. It's relatively easy to make your own IK spine. So I'm just going to go through, and because, like I said, the motion here is relatively smooth, I know I don't need up and down jitters with the controls because it's not the main motion. If she was doing like a gesture like wah with the glass, I might be a little more careful with how I clean this up, but because it's a simple motion, I'm going to be fairly relaxed with how I clean it up, because I know if it's relatively floaty, it's not going to stand out because the body's what's moving most. So simple movement is more important than complex movement when that's not what you're watching, right? If I'm doing a head accent and you're watching the head, I'm going to make sure my curves are perfect and everything is working perfectly. But on the cog during that section, nobody should be looking at my hips while the head's doing this flourishy accent. So I'm going to make sure the cog animation is very simple and maybe even a little bit floaty. That way you're not looking at the cog, you're looking at the head. Because if the cog's popping around, you're going to be looking at the cog more than looking at the face. So that's just something to keep in mind while I'm polishing splining, is what does the audience need to be looking at? And how can I make everything else point to that, right? And so that's relatively clean. So let's just go, I'm going to go through because I don't want to, polish your shot for you. I'm going to go through and find sections to demo certain things, and you can take that and apply that to the rest, all of your shot. So here, this is a section where I like to add a little bit, again, a little bit of fleshiness to the spine. Because right now, if I look at it, the hips are moving a ton, and it almost feels like the chest is locked in place, right? And because you're going from these two dynamic poses, I understand why you're doing it. So rather than messing up the two really nice poses that you have, I'm just going to add a little bit up and down translation to keep the chest from feeling pinned while you switch from one pose to the other. So she's here, right? And so she anticipates this way a little bit. And so I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to use these two keys. So this is all good. So I'm going to keep a key right here, but I'm going to take this key. So she's going to anticipate upwards. So I'm going to pull the spine up a little bit here. So she goes up. And then she's going to drag down. And then I'm going to take this key and just make it go here. Right. I think I can even push this a little bit more and maybe delay it a little bit. And I can delay this by a frame. That's too delayed. So I'm very loose with the way I spline, and I'm very timing heavy of like, how does this feel? Can I delay this a frame? Can I move this one frame forward? Because 90% of splining for me is connectivity. And if the body feels connected, it's going to feel good, even if there's a little jitteriness in there. And so I'm like, okay, will it feel more connected over here or over here? Because timing is connectivity. And so I'm like, I like that the torso drags in TY a little bit. But I'm wondering if I can delay this a couple frames, because I feel like it's kind of drifting up, and it should come up like almost popping up like that. And then I'm like, okay, does this feel good? Right? I'm like, okay, let's try one frame earlier. I like this now. Like, this feels good. I use layers all the time, Cadriano. I use layers on a daily basis, if not more. I'm using layers, so if I'm animating the body, and I'm like, the torso needs a little squashing, stretching, I'll put the chest on a layer, and I'll copy the cog TY and paste it to the chest, and then scale it. I use layers for breathing, so I'll put a locator on the back of the chest, and I'll rotate it to do breathing motion. I use layers for connectivity in the face. If I didn't have layers, I would be very, very sad. I use it on a daily basis in every single shots, basically. And so again, here, she kind of goes up, and you see how her chest kind of hits a lock right here. If you look at like the line of the chest, it looks like it hits a wall. So I'm going to go ahead and stretch the torso a little bit, just because like I feel like I like to get lots of like squashiness in the torso. So as she comes up, I'm going to try and have it come up here. And then she's going to come down, and it's going to almost bounce a little bit, or kind of like a circular settle. So, right. I'm going to delay this. And again, sometimes with motion, you can't tell if it feels good or not until you pump it up to 10. So I'm just going to do this. And I'm like, okay, I can feel like it's hitting down too late, right? It's too late. So I'm going to move these over. And I'm like, okay, that feels a little bit better, but I still feel like the up is too late. I'm like, oh, this feels much nicer now, right? And I'm like, now I can realize that the left to right motion hits a wall too. So that's also what I was feeling. So now that I know the TY feels good, obviously I'm going to tone this back down. And I'm like, oh, this feels really nice. I'm getting this nice squashy stretchiness. I'm going to tone this down a little bit. And now I'm going to go into the translate Y. And I'm just going to make sure that... thank you for the follow, BGC. I'm going to make sure that I delay this a little bit. And I make sure I continue going right until about here, because this is when it hits a wall. So I'm going to move this, and I'm just going to delete keys so that I get this nice smooth motion. And I'm like, oh, wow, that feels really nice now. So she's like, boing, right? And I'm getting this nice, like, fleshy, squashy motion. which might be a little too much, but I can always tone it down, right? I can always go in, pull this curve, and just tighten things up to where it feels a little more tight, right? I think I opened this up and I thought you were going to have a fair amount of poppiness in your cog, in your center of gravity control. And it actually, your center of gravity control feels really nice and your hips feel really nice. I feel like a lot of what's happening is in the chest area. And just doing this is going to make your shot feel so nice. Of like, okay, I feel like this is dragging a little too much. Let's just move this over a frame. And I'm like, oh, this feels so much better now. So just little things of one frame can make so much different in your shot between this and this, right? Timing is everything when it comes to the chest. And also getting rid of little jitters like this can often help as well. And so I'm like, okay, can I get rid of these and still keep the same feeling? Okay, maybe I need a little overshoot like you had, but it not as jittery. I'm like, okay, this still feels pretty nice. Let's just go ahead and hook this up. There we go. That feels relatively the same, and I feel like it's hitting a wall right here, which it is. And so I'm like, okay, can I, again, make an overshoot and settle? So overshoot and settle. It's going to overshoot and then settle back, which the settle is a bit too quick. And again, make it big, feel it out, and then tone it down. And so I'm like, does this feel connected? Yeah, it does. And actually, it doesn't feel too bad being that big. So I'm going to keep it there. Grab this, and I'm going to pull it down. Right. And I'm just going to go through, and I'm going to clean my curves. Right, and already, like, I can feel like this feels so much better now. Just removing, I've probably removed 10 keys from your chest and added 5 in 10 minutes, and I think it feels really nice. I think something that's nice is that you can do is like she's leaning screen left and then she goes wow, and then she goes screen right now she's kind of drifting screen right, and then she goes wow, and so I feel like it kind of removes from that moment that you can have. And so I'm looking and I'm like, okay, how can I keep her over here to start out with, that way when she goes wow, she can move her chest to the right? So I'm like, okay, let's feel this out, right? So she's moving left, which I'm also feeling out what the steps are doing. So the chest is going to kind of overlap left to right based off what your hips are doing. So if I'm watching the hips are traveling right, and I'm like, okay, she's a little bit out of balance here. It doesn't look like it in the shot cam, but just for cleanliness sake, I'm like, okay, I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So she needs to be traveling screen right over that foot. Right. Let me go ahead and turn this off just so I can see what I'm doing. So she's traveling screen right. Then she's traveling screen left. So I'm going to move her left a bit. And then she's traveling screen right. Something like this. Let's just watch this. That's way too much. So let's go ahead and tone this down a bit. Tone this down a bit. Boom, boom, boom. And let's go ahead and tone this down just a little bit. Still too much. There we go. That feels nicer. I might even move this up just a little bit. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. Nice. Okay, so now that I've cleaned this up, I know what my chest should be doing because the hips stop moving right on frame 9. So I'm like, okay, the chest should be moving right until 2 frames after, right? So till frame 11. And then she starts moving screen left. It stops moving screen left on frame 22. So let's have it on frame 24. That's when it stops moving, screen left. And now we have that nice like boom, 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 right? That might be a bit too much, so I'm going to tone this down a little bit. Boom, boom, boom. I'm like, this is still a little too much, so let's move it back a frame, right? There we go. I like that. So let's go ahead and I'm bad about this, but it's very nice to do, is constantly flipping back, not high proxy, that's cursed, low, there we go. Constantly flipping back and forth, so I'm making sure whatever I'm doing still looks good with the rest of the body. Yeah, like honestly, looking at it, it looks better than it did without the head. So I'm really happy with the way this is turning out, of like just simple things that I'm doing, very easy to clean up. So So do you have any questions on that, Sanjana? Is there anything else specifically you want me to go over that I do with my splining polishing pass that you're struggling with? Or, you know, I could go on for another couple hours, but I want to make sure it stays, you know, dedicated to what you need or what you're struggling with. Clean up the jaw. The jaw's a tricky one. So facial controls. Okay, so for the lip corners, I have a very nice tip for this to clean up. Is there any way you could quickly send me the audio so I can have it in Maya just for lip sync purposes? Like, I can go over stuff while you're sending it, but if you could pop that on the Google Drive just so I can hear the audio in Maya, that would be great. But let me go ahead and take a look at what you've got here. Very nice. Cool. Okay. So one thing that I like to do, I don't do this with every shot. Most shots are simple. I don't do this. But for big body mechanic shots like you have, I'm going to create a new camera. And I'm just going to call this face cam. I'm going to go ahead and create a group. And I'm going to call it face cam GRP. And then I'm going to go to my outliner. I'm going to select head first, face cam group, modify, match all transforms. Whoops. Sorry, face cam group first, then the head, modify, match all transforms. There we go. Now we have a camera that can be rotated around the head. So now I can just kind of rotate it, get it exactly how I want it. I'm like, okay, cool. Now I need to go in and I need to set the focal length on the camera to probably about 80, just so I keep it flat, because it needs to be relatively flat in order for me to easily see what the face is doing. So now I'm going to take head control first. Whoops. I want my outliner. Constrain parent. Boom. So now if I play it through, I'm only seeing what the mouth corners are doing, right? Which can look very janky and make it look very, very weird, but it will very much help when you're trying to clean up the mouth corners. 1 second. Let me grab the audio real quick. Download. Cool, thank you so much. Let me go ahead and repath this. No, I do not want to play Blast. Maya. Boom. Okay, let me repath this real quick. Okay, where is the final audio? Okay, let me just flip it over here. Desktop. Okay, sometimes Maya has a weird issue where it can't repath audio, so typically I'll just delete it and I'll just drag it and drop it back into Maya because that's easier. There we go. We should be... What? Can we please have audio? Maya? Yes, I can go over that real quick. Import. Desktop. Unrecognized file type. Interesting. Hold on one second. This is going to be quicker. I'm just going to pop this audio into Audacity. That way I can get it inside Maya because for some reason it doesn't like MP4A. Boom. There we go. Sanjana, do you have your audio offset by a certain amount? It looks like you probably have it offset by 5 frames. Okay, let me try 30.
Wow. No wonder people work. What am I going to do with all this money?
Let me just make sure it looks good in the shot cam.
Wow. No wonder people work.
Okay, cool. So what I did for the face cam, Sanjana, is basically I created a camera. I grouped that camera under a group. I moved the group to face her face. And then I constrained the group to her head. So now if I select the face cam, right? I can still move the camera, but it follows along with the head just because the camera's underneath a group that's constrained, right? So if I just hit play, I can see that, you know, everything's moving around. So what I'm going to do to clean up the jaw is literally, you know, it looks stupid if anybody sees you doing it, but I'm just going to go through and I'm going to make the sound. So like, I'm just going to be like, wow. Okay, so that just needs to be a clean wow, right? Wow. And it just opens and closes, right? So then I'm going to feel out, when do I hit the peak of wow, right? And I also do that based on how loud the person says it. So I'm like, okay, 85 is whenever she's the loudest. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to move this one over and I'm just going to make it ease nicely. I'm going to go like,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
And so here's a really nice trick for everything. So let me quickly move this, create a cube, This is one of the biggest discoveries I've made in my animation period, and it was Sean Lee that taught me how to do this. So I can't take credit. But let's say you have a cube going from point A to point B, right? So it's just going in a straight line. As animators, we don't like straight lines. We want curves. So if I wanted to curve it, I could go in and I could put an in between. Boom. Now it's curved, but it's still kind of weird. And I'm also going to make this quicker just for... There we go. And I'm also going to hit play, pause. Okay. So for mouth corners, we don't want to go in and set in-betweens for every single pose to pose we have on the mouth corners, especially because they're very quick sometimes. Maybe you have it's here and 2 frames later it's here. You don't have the time to put it in between and it's going to be poppy, etc. What you can do, this is for translations and rotations, is you have, okay, TX, I'm offsetting it by 3 frames this way. TZ, I'm going to offset it 3 frames this way. Now, I have an arc. This is a bit quick of a move, so maybe I do 2 frames for each one. There we go. Without adding an in-between, I have an arc now, right? The cube is moving in an arc, and I don't have any in-betweens. The same works for rotations, right? So if I have, let's just set a key here, and let's say I have a character looking, right? So they're looking down, and then they look up, right? So he's going, wee. I'm just going to think about, like, okay, if I'm looking down and I want to look up, right? I'm going to lead with rotate Z, and then I'm going to start going with rotate Y, and then I'm going to go rotate X. So I'm like, okay, let's go into the rotations, and I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to rotate Z 1 frame forward. Rotate X is going to go 1 frame back. Now, look at that. I have a perfect arc on the head, moving 2 curves, as opposed to what I had before was a perfectly straight line. So instead of this, I get that. So that's how I clean up my mouth corners. Is I'm going to go through, let me go ahead and pop this back up. Oops. Undo view change. Oh, darn it. I'm dumb. I forgot to lock my camera. Okay, where is it? Let's just do this quickly. Okay, cool. Okay, let me turn my audio back on.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Okay, so let's say she goes, wow, right? So I'm going to want wow, right? I want it to go back before it goes up. So I'm going to take the mouth corner, which honestly, I typically work like this, and I'm just going to grab this, turn it off. Okay. So if I'm looking at TX and TY, I can see that they're both moving at the same time. Wow, right? But I just said that I want TX to move before TY. So I'm going to take the TY and I'm going to delay it by a frame. I'm going to take TX and I'm going to move it forward by a frame.
Wow.
And look at that. We have free arcs in the face. So I'm literally going to go word by word on the corners, and I'm going to be like, okay, I want the Y to happen before the X. So let's find a section I just did where X happens before Y. Let's find one where Y happens before X.
No one.
It's Quosny. Hello, John. So maybe I want like work, right? So it goes down and then it comes out. So I'm just going to go And I'm going to say, okay, TY. And I'm also going to clean this up a little bit. TY, let's go 1 frame forward. TX, let's go 1 frame backwards. Let's just clean this up.
Work.
There we go.
Work.
Right?
Work. Work.
There we go. So it goes work. And now you have a free arc. And I just literally moved 1 key, 1 key. And then you're perfect. Give me 1 sec to get some water. And so the way I do lip sync is I go through and I do my jaw pass, like I said. So I'm going to be like, okay, no. So I'm going to be like, open, close. No, wander, wander, right? A lot of times I find it's a pitfall for people to over enunciate lip sync. So it's no wonder people work, right? So it's like, no wonder people work. And it over enunciates the jaw. I go through and I see how simple can I make the jaw and still have it read. Because the simpler the jaw with it still reading, the better. Because simpler is better. So I'm like, no wander, wander. Can I do that? No wander. Or do I have to do wander? Because if I do wander, that's more movement and less frames, and that's going to be hard to fit in. So it's like, no wander. Wander. No wander. Okay, I can do that. So I'm going to put it in there and feel it out and be like, okay, that works. So then once the jaw's working, then I'm going to mess with my phonemes.
Work.
So like work, okay? I want a little bit of a flair on work, right? Work. So let's just go in. And
Work.
what is this? Let's open. I'm going to open this up a little bit. Another tip for like k noises is I try to pop the jaw. So you're popping like k, k, but I also try to do like k. So I'm like, she's like, work. So I'm going to open it up on this frame. And then I'm going to go back to here. So it's like, right? Right? Like that, to me, that feels really nice. So like, k, work. And so she's like, she's taking a breath. I'm like, okay, when do I start hearing the breath? I'm going to hear it around here, so I'm going to ease that closed. I'm hearing the loud breathing noise here. And then it comes to a close here, so I'm going to delete this. I don't really need, whoops. Yeah, I don't need the whole rotate Y X curve. There we go. No, I don't really need this, so I'm going to keep that closed. And I'm like, okay, what is this noise? What am I going to... Okay, so I can keep this closed here.
What am I gonna do with all this money?
Right. So that's how I'm going to go through and clean up the jaw, right? Like just going through and just step by step. What is the... Do I need this motion? Does it make my lip sync read, right? So let's just go through here. Let's go ahead back to shot cam.
What am I gonna do with all this money? Wow. No wonder people work. What am I gonna do with all this money?
And then that's another section that I feel like you can fix is, let me go and pull this in.
What do you do with all this money?
Okay, so another thing I like to do is I like to have a mouth selection set. Whoops. That way I can select the entire mouth for time's sake, I'm just gonna do this quick and dirty. Make sure I have all the controls that I need. Make sure I'm not selecting any joints or anything. What are these? Oh, it's the teeth. Okay. Let me just select those two. Okie dokie. Okay, so I'm hearing the M on 204. So I'm going to try to take the M shape on 199, which let's do this in the shot cam. That way I can make sure it still reads. Okay, so let's just take all of this. Which, again, this isn't 100% because I think I may have offset your audio too much. So let's... I'm hearing this, so 1, 2, 3. Okay, so let's try 25 frames just so I'm not moving lip sync around a bunch. Okay, 25 frames. Cool.
Money.
There we go. Okay, so back to what I was saying about the jaw, is a lot of times, especially for me, ins were very tricky to get read, right?
What are you gonna do with all this money?
Right, because it's like money, and it's not reading super well for me right now, and I find a lot of it is in the jaw movement, and so I'm gonna try to do money, right? What am I gonna do with all this money? So I'm gonna try to just open on ma and close on ni. So it's closed on this frame. Ma. And then closed on E.
It's money.
Right?
Money.
To me, that instantly reads better, right? I just literally opened up the jaw and then closed it back, and money reads better now.
Money.
Let me just go back to the shot cam and watch it.
Money. Money.
Now, obviously, I would try to keep... I'd try to keep my lips open. Here. This may not be the best way, but just quickly, I'm going to try to keep it open.
Money.
And then I'm going to go through and... just going to delete this.
Money.
Okay, set a key here, here, and then let's try to keep these.
Money.
Teeth. Zero these out here. Obviously, this is not perfect at all by any means, but
Money.
you'll need to clean up the poses and make them look pretty. But basically what I'm getting at is, like, she's like, what am I going to do with all this money? And she gets this creepy smile. I feel like a pitfall students fall into is closing the lips immediately when the lip sync stops, or opening the lips immediately when it begins. But she's like, what am I going to do with all this money? Right? She's going to keep them open for a fair little bit.
What am I gonna do with all this money?
So just clean up that pose, but try to keep it open like I showed here. Also, I'm just noticing a little bit of poppiness in the rotations here. I try to keep my rotations of the chest fairly simple. So I like her rotating forward. I think you can smooth it out just a little bit. What is this doing? Okay, so rotating left here. I think you can just ease this a bit. That way it's more simple. Cool. How does this feel? There we go. Just noticing little things here and there. But yeah, do you have any questions or anything on that, Sanjana? I probably threw a lot at you, but hopefully some of this helps. Like, this is literally just my process for splining and polishing a shot. It's going through and just simplifying, making sure the motions that are simple and the ones that are complex are complex. But the main thing on making things clean, I am a very, very clean animator. So hopefully that helps. Oh, yes, I also had the demo for what is his name? Cadriano. But yeah, thanks for sending your shot, Sanjana. Possibly, if you'd like, this is the way I can do critiques in the future, because I always have a problem because obviously I can see things in my head, and I do this every day and I know what I want, but because I'm a very technical person, it doesn't work very well for me to draw because I cannot draw. And so, as you've seen in the past few weeks, I'm like, oh, you should do this mouth shape. And then it doesn't work. So, possibly what I might consider doing in the future is anybody who wants a review just sends me their shot. And I will open it up and I will give you in Maya what's in my head, because that's going to be a lot clearer for you guys, and it's going to be a lot easier for me because it won't be me, chicken scratching with a pencil and then deleting it and then scratching again and being like, I'm losing my mind here because it's not helping anyone. So I've really enjoyed this. I've had so much fun doing this, and I think for the future I may do this, for everyone, hopefully. So I may have to figure out how to do this. I may have to take, only 2-3 people critique at a time, because this is a lot more time intensive. But I feel like all of you guys are getting way more out of this, and I'm having a lot more fun than trying to draw. So possibly in the future I can do this more. And I feel like I'm a very fast animator. That's kind of what my shtick's been in the industry. So being fast, being efficient, and having a lot of tips and tricks that help people with animating things that are hard quicker. So keep an eye out for that. I'm going to talk to Madison and Cynthia and see if we can find a good workflow for this, but I would very much like to continue doing these kind of demos, feedback in Maya sessions in the future. So with that, let me transition out of there. I need to open something up really quickly and upload it to Sync Sketch, because I have a demo for Cadriano and also wanted to show off a really cool shot that's going on. So actually, also, while I'm waiting for Resolve to open up, I'm going to run a quick ad break, and I'm going to go get some more water because I'm really thirsty. So I will be back in 1 minute. Okay, I'm back. Alrighty now. Open up the 2 shots I downloaded. save this out to my desktop. Let's just do this as an MP4. So just so you guys can see what I'm switching over to, let me switch to screen share. I'm just rendering out 2 play blasts. This was an idea that I had that I pitched to Madison because I'm too busy to animate it, and she's a way better animator than I am. But I pitched an idea of doing a shot and putting it in Unreal, and we both kind of brainstormed out an idea. And oh, where is it now? Here we go. So basically the idea is a girl who's very ballet heavy that's also a roller skater. So we started out with like, okay, she's on the top of a building, she hits some poses, boom, she pops out her rollerblades, she falls, she rolls, and then she's gonna roller skate off screen. So obviously the first part, this is very rough spline, like this is basically a blocking plus pass. But basically what I wanted to demo is Cadriano asked, when you're doing a heavy body mechanics shot, something Kung Fu Panda or Kung Fu based or parkour based, how do you take your reference? How do you animate it without, just copying your reference one-to-one? So I'm going to go through with this and show you my process. As soon as I get it uploaded to SyncSketch, I'm going to show my process on how I do that. So give me 1 second here. Let me open up, log into my SyncSketch. Okay, cool. And then your question about breathing, I do, and I will show that in Maya super quickly after I get done with this. So basically my method for doing body mechanics shots, because it's very easy first and foremost to just do the mechanics, which is great for an assignment, but if you're wanting a demo reel piece, you can't just take reference and animate that and expect that to get you a job in feature or anything high level. A great body mechanics exercise that's just body mechanics might get you into games, it might get you into VFX, but it won't get you into feature because there's no personality there. So the first thing that Madison did amazingly was, this isn't your typical body mechanics shot. Because, yes, it's body mechanics, but it's themed around, okay, this girl is a ballerina, but she also roller skates. And so how can she do a jump that's ballet focused? So obviously it's not super great in that it's polished, but, this is a very ballet heavy pose. This ballet heavy pose here. This ballet pose. Boom, super graphic roller skater pose, right? So you're doing the same parkour motions that you would get from your parkour reference video, or the same Kung Fu Panda, Kung Fu reference from a Kung Fu video. But let's say, okay, you have a guy that's doing Kung Fu. Well, maybe, let's think of a personality or a trait that you can add to this guy doing Kung Fu that will set you apart from every other Kung Fu shot. Let's think of a trait. So what if, let's think of something that would set you apart. It's hard, and that's why a lot of people don't do it. But, let's think. What if the guy doing Kung Fu has one arm? And so he's having to do everything with one hand. That's something specific that's going to set you apart. That's kind of cliche. That's not a super great example of what I'm thinking. I'm just pulling up a blank right here off the top of my head. But, what if you take two fighting styles and you mix them together, right? You're not just taking one. Maybe you're taking a little taekwondo, you're taking a little kung fu, and you're taking different. It's fine, Madison. It's fine. I told them it's rough spline. But finding different personality traits to add to your body mechanics assignment is very important to having a demo reel body mechanics shot. But with that said, basically what I had Madison do, what we talked about was, okay, she drew out this pose and I was like, I love this pose. This is so graphic and so amazing. This is awesome. So you have this pose. Let's say we got this from reference or we got this from our mind. And we had, this pose. So whether you're using body mechanics shot from reference or you're doing sketches, thumbnails, you get these two poses. How do you get from here to here? Let me delete this. How do you get from here to here? Boom, 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 boom. Okay. So basically my process is I'm going from here to here. I'm like, okay, well, I want to hit this pose really hard, right? So if she's here and she just drifts down into here, that's not going to look very good. The hands are very important because the hands are so graphic in this pose. I need to find a way to go from here to hitting this pose really hard. So what if I have both hands come up? That way I have more distance to go down to really hit that super hard. So I was like, okay, well, let's go here. Let's just get both hands up here, right? That way you can go boom and go straight down, right? And I'm like, okay, what's the other thing I have to do? I have to punch these two legs going out, right? So how can I do that best? Well, by keeping them in longer and really hitting them, right? So I'm like, okay, well, let's just, keep them up here. Let's keep them as close together as I possibly can. That way when they go out, they have more distance and faster, and that's going to draw the eye. Right? So that's literally my process. So I'm like, okay, cool. So the thing I talked about here is, we have this pose, cool. The arm is up. And then you have this pose, cool. The arm is up. So is she going to keep the arm up the whole time and she's going to go down and jump? That's going to be really boring. So can we find a ballet pose between this pose here and this pose here where the right arm is down? That way you can go down and then jump, right? And so I asked Madison, I was like, is there any good poses that go down here? And she was like, oh yeah, there's this pose here. And so she did the ballet pose, and that's where you have the arm down here. That way, when you go up, you can drag it down. You can get this super nice pose, and you can come up. The other thing you think about is contrast, okay? At the very end, the pièce de résistance of the shot is the legs kicking out. So you don't want the legs kicking out here because that's going to take away from this motion here, right? So let's keep the legs as close in as we can. Maybe she can do like the flutter thing as she goes up, right? So keeping the legs together, that way you can punch this motion here. So let's keep the legs in. That's why we decided to keep the legs in and the arms down. And so to show this better, Madison threw these poses in super quick this morning, which is awesome. But I'm going to just go through the same process, except this time I don't have the information that's already there. So you're seeing real time my thought process for doing a body mechanics shot. So you got this pose here. This is blocked in a lot more than I thought it was. Well, I'm going to do a little feedback for Madison and finding in-betweens. So I'm just thinking, right? You've got arm up, arm to the left, right? And you've got this super dynamic poses of straights, curves, curved leg to straight leg, super nice. Here, you're rolling, so you've got these nice rounded arms, you've got a straight leg, you've got a leg, very nice, and it all flows perfectly within this roll, right? But this in between, what if we can play a little bit with not having the arms be in the same pose as we roll around, right? Because they're here, she rolls around, they're still in the same pose. Okay, will do, man. Will do, Madison. But what if here we have the arm touching the ground? That way you can go from straight to S curve, almost, because the hand is peeling off the ground, back to curve, right? Getting that shape change in there. And then here, what if we can have this leg farther down, keeping it straight? Let me go ahead and erase this. Keeping that leg perfectly straight out. Still keeping it dragging this way. And then boom, get it out over here. That way you can come down. Boom, just dragging it. But yeah, hopefully, Cadriano, that kind of gives you an idea of what I'm talking about, of my process of I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at my reference and I'm going to say, okay, key pose, key pose, key pose, key pose. Those are my key poses. I'm going to block those out in Maya. I'm going to play blast in Stepped and I'm going to upload it to Sync Sketch, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to draw in-betweens. And I'm going to say, okay, why should I do this in between? What should I drag? What should I lead with? What should I follow with? And I'm going to draw out, like, okay, if this is where the legs are here, if this is where the legs are here, and this is where the legs are here, where are my in-betweens going to be? And I'm going to draw out what's leading, what's following, where in-betweens are going to be. And I'm also going to use my reference to help with those in-betweens. And I'm going to be like, okay, what's leading in my reference? Oh, the head is. Well, how can I push that even more in my drawing of an in-between? And then I'm going to go back into Maya and I'm going to use those drawings to do more in-betweens. That way you're pushing your reference, you're pushing your animation past what your reference base gives you. So hopefully that makes sense. And then quickly to go over what Shun Sheng is asking about breathing loop. Let me just open up Aya super quickly. Actually, you know what? Let's open up a different rig. I want to use a different rig. Let's open up the Mulan rig, which is also a great rig. Okay, so if I'm wanting to do a breathing loop, let's make sure this is the one. Okay, cool. I have two ways of doing it. The simplest way to do a breathing loop is I'm just going to use the temp pivot from Animbot, and I'm going to place the pivot of her spine right at the base of her neck. And I'm going to set a key. I'm going to have to take this off, set a key, turn it back on. Okay. So I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to rotate it up. And then I'm going to go back down. I'm going to set a key, and then I'm going to copy my pose. Boom. So if I go ahead and rotate her arms down. Cool. Let's go ahead and just universally set a key. Right, now we have the basis of a breath. So let's just go ahead and get the shoulders involved. So if I'm breathing, the shoulders are going to be a little bit delayed. So I'm going to have the peak of the shoulders a few frames after the peak of the chest. And then I'm going to have them come back down. And I'm going to have them overshoot and settle back. There we go. Let's see how this is. That's way too delayed. So I'm going to move this back a couple frames. That's way too quick and way too much. Okay, how's this? Okay. So this breath is so slow. I'm like, okay, maybe the overshoot settle doesn't work. Let's just delete that. There we go. That's better. Let's move it back a frame. Oop. Let's see how this feels. What I'm also going to do is I'm also going to switch this to master. There we go. There we go. Breathing. So now maybe I'm going to take the head control. And I'm just going to go up and back down to 0, right? So now when she goes up, that's how it's going to be. But as we know, when we breathe, the nose dips down and then it goes up. So as she starts to breathe, I'm going to want to antic downward in the rotate X to where she comes up. And then as she comes down, she's going to want to continue to go up and then down. There we go. So now you've got this nice big breath. And so if I wanted to, theoretically, I could take all this and I could have it all finish on this frame. And then I could curves, infinity, cycle. And there you go. You have a breath. But it's a bit too big. So let's go in and I'm going to use scale left on Animbot. And I'm just going to scale the breath down. Oh, that's pretty good. Let's go ahead and scale it down a little bit more. Yeah, let's scale it down a little bit more. There you go. You've got your breath. And I use this and I layer this on top of an animation layer. So I don't just animate this on the base. Let's say I have a character walking and I'm like, oh, they need to breathe. I'm going to add these controls to an animation layer and I'm going to slap that on there. That's a method very heavily used in games, is adding breathing layers to stuff. And a lot of that done in Unreal Engine. So, but yeah, hopefully that answers your question, Shunsheng. And then obviously if you want to get a lot more detailed into it, you know, you can add a little idle left and right. So like obviously it needs to loop, so you've got there, so like as she breathes, maybe you can have it a little to the left, a little to the right. And that's way too much, but now that I have it in there, I can go in the graph editor and just like boom, boom. Okay, that's too much, so let's just try left to right. That's not bad. So then I would copy this so that it's not repeating left, right, and it's actually cycling properly. And then I would go through and do the TY as well, but hopefully that helps. And with that, I'm starting to lose my voice. I'm getting tired, and I think I've answered all the questions. If anybody has any, I have a couple more minutes that I can answer some. If not, I may call it here. Again, thank you guys for everyone who subscribed. The 5 gifted from Brandon is an absolute legend. Thank you for the bits. will move the pivot on the chest controller. So I moved the pivot, but I did that through Animbot. So it's not the same as like hitting the D key and moving the pivot on the actual control. This is called a temporary pivot. And so you put it there, you animate, and then it bakes it back to the original pivot. If I wanted to, what I would do, this is another method I use. I will actually create a temporary control on my animation. So let's say this is where I'm doing the breathing, right, on this control. Once I've animated my entire shot, I'm going to create a locator. Modify, match all transforms, scale it up, and I'm just going to place it in that temporary pivot place where I had it. Okay, so now I'm going to either constrain it and bake it or use X keys, and I'm going to copy, bake frames, so that way the locator is moving exactly how the chest is. Then I'm going to put this on an animation layer. I'm going to constrain the chest to this locator. Boom. So now if I move the locator, it moves that temporary pivot point. And now on the animation layer, I'm going to animate my breathing. So that way the base layer already does what the control locator does. But then I can layer on breathing on top of it with a locator. So hopefully that answers your question. And then how do you animate? Well, first you go on to PayPal and you send me money and I animate for you. No, I'm kidding. You guys know how to animate. They're just messing with me. So, with that, if there's no more questions, yeah, no problem. If there's no more questions, I think I'm going to end the stream here. Thank you guys for coming. It was a lot of fun. I think I'm going to update the way I give feedback in the future to do more of this kind of thing. But thank everybody for showing up, gifting subs, subbing, bits, chatting. You know, I appreciate the chat and the questions so much. So thank you guys. Thank you for the follow, Tukarn Parat. And I will see you guys next week. So, see ya.